are finally live. Sorry about that. We had some technical issues there. But welcome. 20 minutes or so late. I don't suppose it matters to some people, but I'm sorry if you're going to watch a program at 9 or whatever. You'll have to just catch up later. Yes. So this is Pint and Politics. My name's Ben Sellers. I think we're about 20 or so programs in now. We've had some, really brilliant conversations. The whole point of Pint and Politics is that it's very casual. We're down the pub, just having a chat. And tonight be no different. But we're picking up on some of the debates that happened around the European Super League, the botched launch of the European Super League. And we're going to talk about football. We're going to a bit about kind of wider links between politics and football and campaigning and so on. So tonight I've got two Callums. We're going to have to call Callum Nolan Callum with a K just to distinguish them. But it's great to have them both. I know they're both like very serious football fans, and and there'll be an interesting discussion. So firstly, we've got Callum Bell, who is a Newcastle United supporter like myself, and he's been involved in the Ashley Out campaign in Newcastle. I'll let him explain a bit more about that later. Callum was also employed until quite recently, Callum, as a community organiser for the Labour Party.
Yeah, I left after the general election at the start of the pandemic.
Right. And that's relevant actually to the discussion. So we'll come back to that as well, because obviously, like some of the stuff that you're doing through the community organising unit was around football and politics. So it's quite interesting that. You are a mental health nurse, is that right? Is that your job now? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still doing that. It's keeps
you describe yourself on Twitter as a Socialist Unison rep, and you're also vice chair of Momentum's national coordinating group. That's right. Yeah. So really good to have you on, Callum. What are you drinking tonight?
Estrella.
Right, very nice. I've also I've broken habit actually, because I normally have some sort of weird hipster shit, but I've got a pint of Red Stripe tonight. I think it's that kind of weather, and if I am going to drink lager, I'll drink Red Stripe normally. And we've also got Callum with a K. He's a Manchester United fan. I actually met Callum quite a long time ago now, when he was doing filming for the Labour Party, and did some really good stuff with Laura Pidcock up in northwest Durham. He is what you call anti-Glazer fan, anti-Glazer campaigner.
Right? Yeah, we'll say that. Yeah. I think every United fan is, aren't they? But, yeah.
And you're also a Labour Party councillor at Middleton North, and you're also a Hayward and Middleton CLP chair. And you've also done bits and bobs with the People's Assembly, so I've come across you doing that. And we recently did a show around the time of the European Super League stuff going on. We did a show with the People's Assembly, which was very interesting. But it's like an hour wasn't long enough, was it?
No, we've gone on forever. That's why I'm glad that we've got this existential one in politics. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and then I also have to apologise to you that I think halfway through that I accused you of not being a Man United fan, which is probably like the worst thing that you can do to somebody. It was a bit complicated because I thought I thought you'd kind of thrown yourself fully into the FC United stuff.
No, I didn't. We'll get to that. I think that was just the semantics around legacy fan and exactly what that meant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What are you drinking tonight, Callum?
Same as you. I thought, and I did think, because I do like the odd bit of hipster shit myself every now and then. And I thought, right, if we've got to show what we're drinking on a live stream, then I'll get something hipsterish from the shop. But hipsterish for me is Hop House 13, the beer that Guinness have done, which is gorgeous, but a little bit too hot for that. So I've gone simple as well, and for good old Amstel.
Good stuff.
Lovely, crisp and refreshing in this weather.
Okay, so we'll get cracking because there's quite a lot to talk about. Just wanted to, if we could go to you, Callum, with a C first. Just to ask you what you think, sort of, now we're a few weeks on from that European Super League debacle, and what do you reckon about, I suppose, the outrage and the kind of activism that there was, and then what the potential is now and what's happening now.
Yeah, I mean, like the Super League when that came out, I remember because it sort of it came out of the blue a little bit. There'd been rumblings, but it was potentially on the cards. But I think we announced it on like a Thursday or Saturday. Was it Saturday at midnight or something like that? So they clearly weren't that confident in what we were putting forward. But the whole Super League stuff wasn't particularly surprising at all, really. We're essentially in world football now. We've got all top flight clubs owned by millionaires. The Premier League's pretty much a playground for them at the minute. And it's so how quick the game has moved into where we are at the minute. It's quite surprising. Well, it's amazing, really. If you compare sort of Alan Shearer was like the top world transfer record for 12 million. Now that kind of these days kind of get you in under sort of 21 potential sort of player, and I think it's just sort of the whole game's moved on, and I think that the thing that's driving that change is the people desperate to make profit and to capitalize from the game and put revenue in pockets, because they know football fans are loyal, they know that people around the country will do anything for the club, and they're trying to exploit that in a minute. And seeing people rise up and sort of say no to that, it was just so amazing to see. It was empowering, sort of emotional at times, it was just truly fantastic to see. Whether that's sustained, I don't know. I've obviously had a bit of experience organising with football fans, and there's a bloke in Newcastle, if you heard him, Colin Whittle, he does a lot with the football food bank, and he's a legend of a Newcastle United supporter. He said organising football supporters is a bit like herding cats, and it is. It's an incredibly complicated set of dynamics that makes it successful or not successful. And I think it has pitted down now, but I think they're very much wary, these billionaire owners, of the power that fans have now. And it'll be interesting to see what their next steps are. And what fans need to be thinking about is, we're going to be coming back. That was round one. What we're going to do for round two?
Yeah. And Callum with a K. So Man United were obviously part of this. Were you shocked at the reaction of the fans? Because it was pretty unanimous, wasn't it? Like, there wasn't like a kind of split down the middle with Man United fans. There was like hostility right across the board. Were you surprised at it?
Yeah. I mean, it broke. United were playing Burnley, and I had it on in the house. And when something traumatic happens, and it takes you quite a while to really understand exactly what's going on. So we were playing Burnley. It was a good game, and Martin Tyler just started coming out with it, and Gary Neville was doing the co-commentary. And they mentioned it, and I remember thinking, "Oh right." For me, the logic behind it at that time was, "Oh, this must be like a pre-season thing, like a pre-season tour, like they do, or they must be doing that every year." And then Gary Neville started going hell for leather about how it's disgusting, it's immoral, it's a disgrace, I can't even commentate on the game. And I thought, hang on. And then the WhatsApp group started going there, and it was like, this is actually a thing that's going to replace the Champions League. It was crazy, and we were really shocked. I'll be honest with you. We never thought that they'd go that far. There's always been rumblings of them trying to change the Champions League, water down the Champions League, make it, so it can make more money, etc., etc. But to actually take away the kind of competitive edge and that sort of jeopardy, genuinely, none of us saw that coming. I have to be honest. I mean, maybe we're in this kind of bubble of being Manchester United fans and having our own problems with the Glazers and stuff like that. That's why I'm always intrigued to kind of hear what it was like for fans like yourselves who aren't in the big six and wouldn't have been involved in it. We were really shocked. We were, and it kicked off royal there and then. And you could sense the energy building. And yeah, like you say, it was unanimous among all United fans. I don't know one person who would have got behind it. And I think, and I've said this before, it made me and a lot of other people realise how incompetent multi-millionaires can actually be, to actually think that this could go ahead.
Like, just sort of I mean, I was a bit surprised that there was this kind of like big outpouring and sort of upsurge of kind of activism. I suppose a lot of it was online, and probably COVID, plays a part. People have kind of, it's easier to find your voice, isn't it, rather than everybody sort of piling down to the stadiums and stuff. So I suppose some of it might have been around that. But were you kind of like, because obviously, like, there's been, I mean, Callum with a C will kind of tell us that about Newcastle situation, but it is a real struggle to get people to, take action against clubs. So were you not surprised that there was that there was such kind of a unanimous kind of reaction to it?
I think just to give you a bit of context of stuff that's happened to United fans, and I wasn't directly involved in any of this direct action, like the lads who turned up at Carrington training ground and stuff. But if we go back in history and see exactly what's happened when something's hit people so emotionally, like United fans, and how close it's got to proper trouble. So they call themselves the Manchester Education Committee, and it's a group of lads that's interchangeable, that come out when something big happens and perform some direct action, and sometimes it can be quite sinister. So it's not just kind of bringing a flag to a game or wearing green and gold or boycotting and stuff like that. It's a small group of people who get some inside information and act on it. So the first time I remember it happening was when Rio Ferdinand wouldn't sign a new contract unless it was for £100,000 a week. So this group of lads, and I know one or two of them, found out where he lived in Alderley Edge, posh bit of South Manchester, and went to his house. And they didn't they didn't kind of break anything, or they weren't going to kind of do him in or anything like that. But they went to his house with a banner and made themselves known. And that was the first time I remember hearing about them. And that was like early to mid 2000s. The second time I remember it happening was when Wayne Rooney said that he wanted to leave and he wanted to go to City. And this was the same group of lads. And I'm not glorifying this, by the way. I'm just giving you a little bit of context as to how kind of, dark football fans can get. And that's what maybe we'll talk later on about why that is and why it's so kind of entrenched in people's lives that they feel like they need to do this. But they did the same to Wayne Rooney. When Wayne Rooney said that he was going to Man City, these are things that really kind of go against the grain of being a football fan. And, it's more than a religion for some of these people. It is for me. Maybe not to the point where I'd go to a player's house and kind of hold up a banner saying join City and die, but it is for some people. And it was the same for this group of lads when this news broke. So what you had is the Glazer out movement. We were all coming back together. And let's not forget, this is, lazy punditry that's been pointed out by Jamie Carragher. Thank God for him. And I can't believe I'm saying this about someone like Jamie Carragher. But him and Gary Neville were brilliant over this. But he's pointed out the lazy punditry of people like Jermaine Genius and Graham Souness, who have tried to say that this is to do with poor results. There was a massive Glazer out protest in 2010 when we played AC Milan in one of the knockout stages of the Champions League. We were in the Champions League final in 2009. We'd won it the year before. We were in the Champions League final in 2011. It's nothing to do with poor results. This is when people really, really kind of get pissed off when information's coming in about how much that family have been sucking out of our club, how much money that they've paid themselves in dividends, how much money that they've had to pay to service a debt that they brought on the club. So, this is nothing new when it comes to United fans, and it's nothing to do with bad results either. It's when they know that they've got to kick off, they will kick off. And there's a wider movement that, I was at Old Trafford during the Liverpool game, but, when the game got called off, there was another set of lads who was the same set of lads who blocked the bus, and went to the Lowry Hotel and wouldn't let the United team bus leave. And then you've got the kind of wider movement like us lot who were at the stadium. I had the opportunity to go in the ground and go on the pitch, but I thought that wouldn't look good for a local councillor, so I stopped myself from doing that. But my point is that this is nothing new for United fans. When they know that they need to kick off, a lot like you guys do, and I've been there with you guys. I've been at anti-Mike Ashley marches and during the games where you're in the Championship and stuff, because I was at uni in Sunderland at the time. So I actually went up there because I had a few mates who I met at uni who were up in the Leazes corner. So, proper football fans know when it's time to act, and that's what we've seen lately. And I think a lot of it does have to do with pent-up aggression and energy because of the pandemic. People haven't had that much to do anyway. Would it have been this big of a reaction if it was during normal times? I suppose we won't know. But no, it wasn't a surprise, Ben, not in the slightest.
And Callum, in the Newcastle situations, obviously, a bit different, but there are similarities there as well, isn't there? I mean, I was involved in Sack the Board in 1988, like, and so it's been going on a long time, and I think Callum's right, isn't he, that fans kind of, especially that hardcore, know when it's time, don't they?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I said about organising fans a bit like herding cats, but at the same time, I've never met a more creative bunch of people when it comes to either kicking off or doing some really hilarious to piss people off. I think if you remember back, sort of, it's slightly before my time of getting involved with it, they did a sports redirect where they essentially copied the Sports Direct website for Mike Ashley and redirected you to cheaper alternatives. And the lads who were doing it, they got absolutely hounded by lawyers and were obviously very careful of what they did. But that's just utterly brilliant. And I think it's what happened with Newcastle, and I guess how it's different is that Mike Ashley hasn't wanted to sell the football club. He makes too much money from it, either directly from the revenue that you get from being in the Premier League and not reinvesting in the team, and also the fact that we're plastered with Sports Direct logos all around the stadium. And that, he doesn't pay the going rate for advertising on that. So he's making massive amounts of money there for free advertising. And I guess what Newcastle United fans have been trying to do through this time is trying to make Mike Ashley a willing seller through different ways of putting pressure on and different tactics. But the end goal is to put Mike Ashley in a position where it's through financial sort of damage through sports redirect, or just absolutely tarnishing his brand and making it a really, really unpopular thing to want to be associated with. And that's what our goal's always been, to make Mike Ashley in a position where he wants to sell. And that's difficult because I think Mike Ashley, from what I've picked up through being sort of someone who sort of reads papers and follows what's going on in Newcastle, I think he's a fragile narcissist. And he doesn't want to be beaten. And I think that's something that we've been sort of trying to do. And obviously at the minute we're saying with Newcastle United going through a sort of different issue, which we'll probably come on to down the line, with the Saudi Arabian government wanting to purchase the club. I think we're in a different position. Things have massively died off in terms of fan campaigning and fan organising. But in terms of like that anger and that, yeah, it's incredible how much dedication, how much time people will give towards a football club. And the similarities are around a lack of autonomy, a lack of ownership over something that you love, and someone else who doesn't give a shit about it just taking it away like it means nothing to you. And that anger just boils up inside you.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I've always, I regret really that I haven't been more involved in the Ashley Out campaigns and stuff. I mean, I suppose you always have to prioritize what you focus on. But and I am a season ticket holder as well. There's a certain amount of guilt, in going and paying, and and we can talk about that later as well. But one of the things that I from a little bit of an outsider's point of view, because I haven't been, in the organising meetings where you've been discussing this, but the simple kind of boycott or nothing kind of campaigning is a real problem, isn't it, for football fans? I don't know if Callum, Manchester, did boycotts get anywhere? Because what we found at Newcastle is that people are very, very reluctant, and I suppose I want to drill down on why that might be, because obviously people, as Callum just said there, people love their club. They genuinely love the club, and the thought of being, not being able to go to games, or, I mean, maybe even for some people not being able to buy the shirt. I mean, obviously there's alternatives and so on, but it is so wrapped up in like, buying into the club and everything. And one of those things is obviously being at the game. But I remember a while ago they did something like, which was a bit of a kind of, I suppose, a halfway house, which was, I think they asked people to walk in late. And I mean, I'm over in the East Stand, and I was literally, I think the only person going in, and I got a bit of abuse. I mean, I was the only person that wasn't going in, and I was waiting outside, and they were going, "What are you doing?" You know, like, but to a certain extent, I can understand it as well, because people don't want to miss a minute, and really that's kind of like a big set. You know, that's a big leverage that we could potentially have, but it doesn't quite happen, does it? Callum, from Callum with a K, do you want to just say what you think from a Man United point of view on that?
Yeah, I mean, all the lads that I know, it's like they're never boycotting the games. It's they can't. It's impossible. I mean, and it's an addiction, isn't it? So football's an addiction. Not just kind of watching it on TV and being part of it all, but the match day experience, especially for a lot of the lads. I mean, I can't talk for kind of other, families and women and stuff like that, and kids that go to the games. But for the lads who are my age, who have got families, that's their thing on a weekend. That's what they do. They go and support the club. A lot of these lads do home and away. That's their one get out. They work all week. They graft like mad. They graft their asses off. They put food on the table for the wives and kids, or and then they go out to the match. That's all they've got. And this is what the likes of the Glazers, the likes of Mike Astley and stuff thrive off. That's what they use, because they know that it's an addiction, and they know that they're always going to get people going to the games. So the boycott aspect, the only kind of debate that I've seen on boycotting Old Trafford has been on Twitter, with people saying on Twitter, these kind of nameless faces saying, people shouldn't be going to the games. It's just not going to happen. People love the club too much. Got 4th, 5th generation United fans. They're not going to boycott the game. Where the boycott can come in, and where it's already helped with United, is boycotting sponsors. I know that's a lot more difficult for Newcastle in a way, but like you said before, Callum, the sports redirect stuff was brilliant. And what United have done is, there was a potential shirt sponsor that was going to be sponsoring United's training shirt or something for the coming season or the season after. They've now pulled out because of a widespread, well-coordinated attack on them by United fans. I can't remember what the website is, but there's like a trip advisor for businesses and companies. I can't remember what it is, but there was a really well-coordinated attack on a few United sponsors on that as well. And that's the way that they're doing it now. Because they know that they can't bring themselves to not go to the game. And, season ticket holders as well, we all say that if anybody gives a season ticket up at a club like United, then someone will just come and take it anyway, instantly. It's that well supported. I'm sure it's similar at Newcastle. It's a big club with a massive fan base. So that's a difficult one, and I don't blame anyone for not wanting to go to games. I think there are other ways. There are other ways to disrupt that match day experience. So what Sky Sports sell, what BT sell, what the Premier League sell, a lot of it has got to do. I mean, it's a shame that during the pandemic they've still managed to kind of put games on, and it's actually not been that bad. It's been good for us watching it at home. We've needed it, but we are a big part of that match day experience, and we can do stuff at the game that could change that. The green and gold stuff, the interesting and creative banners that I've seen at St James's Park every now and then. There are ways to do it that don't mean boycotting. And United fans, even though we've not been able to go to the game, I've managed to get Joe Glazer. He's going to be coming to a fans forum in the next couple of weeks. They've never spoke to us. They've never spoke to United fans, the Glazers, ever. So the fact that he's willing to come and sit and actually speak to the Man United Supporters Trust and open up a dialogue means that we're already winning. We're already progressing. It is progress. And I think that's important. But yeah, I don't expect people to boycott the game. It's too important for them. It's the most important thing in a lot of people's lives. Let's have it straight. It's huge football. And you don't know unless you're a football fan. But it's massive. It's what you think about every day.
And Callum, obviously in your role as a community organizer, I imagine that you've kind of had these discussions, and this is because you just explain a little bit about, your kind of job role. Obviously you're a fan as well, so the kind of mix, the two things mix themselves up. But like was that like what you're trying to sort of like get a more creative approach within the Newcastle fan base?
Yeah, so the whole me getting involved with sort of anti-Mike Ashley stuff. So before I even worked sort of for the Labour Party, obviously a sort of massive football fan, involved in on the outside of things. Like when things would happen, I would go along to get involved. But it was actually a conversation with my then sort of head of community organising, Dan Firth, who's a Newcastle United fan, incidentally. And he was sort of saying, like, we're doing a thing about giving someone a bloody nose, and who's the biggest baddie in your area to give someone a bloody nose. And we're talking about each area where we had community organisers, and some had it sort of around. It was again football related. Stoke City, the Bet 365, I think, it's a Stoke-based company, and actually the charge, the pay the staff in a minimum wage, despite the fact that the pay earn absolutely a boatload in things, and also a Labour Party donor as well. So we talked about that, and then Mike Ashley was just the biggest one we could think of in the whole country, really. And he's been someone who Unite have done a lot of work around with Shirebrook and what happened there, where it sort of had like Victorian workhouse-like conditions, and people giving birth in toilets due to fear of them losing the job if they went on the sick. Like, just utterly atrocious. And Mike Ashley is a fragile narcissist. He's also an utter bastard. Horrible, horrible person. If you look what he's done in his life and the pain and the suffering he's put people through who are there to put food on the table for the family, and the fact that he's a multi-billionaire flying around in his helicopter, he's utterly ruthless, and he's probably the best example of just how capitalism can just be so evil. And that's where that sort of conversation started. So one of the things that I did was start building relationships up with different football groups, because they've sort of fragmented over time, falling outs over tactics. Boycott was that boycott's a really difficult one, because it, like Callum, completely agree with what Callum's just said there about this is what people love, but also it's like one of the few things that we can do as fans is withdraw, I guess, our labour, withdraw our support, but it's incredibly hard to do, and it's a tactic. And I mean, sticking to community organising, Olinsky has sort of 10 rules for radicals, and one of them is a good tactic is one that people enjoy. So you talk about that sports redirect, and that's sort of a bit funny and a bit of a laugh, and sort of pissing off Mike Ashley. And the other one is a tactic that drags on, becomes a drag. And essentially, that's exactly what happened with the idea of boycotts. People didn't want to do it. It felt awful, not supporting your club. And the other difficulty is in the match that you're on about, where you sort of you got heckled for coming in late. I think they scored in the first 2 minutes. So it was a 10-minute walk in. We're going to walk in at 10 minutes. It was on Sky, so big TV watching. And if you can imagine that, starting the match and there's no one in the stadium, we all walk in after 10 minutes, it would have been superb. It was never going to happen. Like I said, they scored in 2 minutes, and then all the people who did walk in after 10 minutes were getting abused because they were the reason why we conceded. What other ones did we have? We had Man City. Man City was, again, it was a Monday night kickoff, 8:00 on Sky Sports. The plan was at the end of the game, everyone in the Gallagher end, as many people as possible, would stay behind. So whilst we're on the pitch doing the sort of punditry at the end, in the background, all you can see is a load of fans not leaving. So I guess that's another sort of basic sort of principle of sort of striking, isn't it? Sort of either occupy somewhere, occupy St. James's Park after it. And we went and won against Man City 2-1. Matt Ritchie, 90th minute penalty. Also signed Miggy Almiron as well, which I guess was fan pressure. I'd like to think that we sort of put Mike Ashley in a position where he broke the transfer record that hadn't been sort of broken since Michael Owen. Just on that day, I think we announced it in the stadium as well at half time. And I think just the one thing that sort of we learned quite quickly with it is that you can't base it upon the football, because you have no control over football. So to use football and the results that happen on the field to control, I guess, the emotion and the anger that fans have, 9 out of 10 times Newcastle are going to get hammered against Man City, but just sod's law, we did it with Man United as well. We had banners in the stadium, and then bloody Matty Longstaff scores a worldie, and you just kind of control it. And I think that was one of the things that, so in terms of community organising, it was massively around bringing fans together, identifying people. And one of the things that we wanted to do was keeping this at the top of the agenda and keeping what's happened at Newcastle United right at the top. Rafford left, fans were furious, and we wanted to keep it on the top of the agenda. But the problem is, and a bit of that lazy punditry that Callum referred to earlier, the media wanted to spin it as we were just unhappy with Steve Bruce getting appointed after Rafford left. It had nothing to do with Steve Bruce. I mean, he's an absolute numpty, but we're really unhappy that he got appointed. But Really unhappy when he got appointed, but he was a symptom of the cancer that is Mike Ashley and his getting appointment when Rafa Benitez, a world-class coach, left. So what happened is what we did was a bit of media training with some of the lads, so that when the cameras did turn up to events that we did, so on the day that Steve Bruce got appointed, we're like 3:30 in the afternoon, said everyone 5 o'clock, meet outside sort of the Sports Direct shop at Northumberland Street. And we've got about 50, 60 people there with like an hour and a half's notice. And we had sort of banners made up. We had this lad from Concert, actually, Brian, Geordie Signs there. And he used to pump out these banners for us basically with an hour's notice. And what we did was straight away, we've got loads of people there, camera crew were there, interviewing fans, and we're directing the ones who were sported, sort of getting the answers across. So when we went down the route, so how unhappy are you about Steve Bruce getting the job at Newcastle United? This isn't about Steve Bruce. This is about Mike Ashley. Mike Ashley has done reeling off all the facts, putting the agenda straight, and controlling the narrative. And week after week, we extended it, and we kept it at the top of Sky Sports News. And again, it was about 2 parts, I guess. One about conscious raising, for me anyway. I think it was a lot, the lads I was involved in at the time on the left anyway, Labour Party members, a lot of them. Part of it was about conscious raising and around the idea that, look, what's happening with Newcastle United is a symptom of what happens with capitalism. Capitalism doesn't care about how you feel and about how happy you are or unhappy you are. It cares about exploiting you. It cares about making as much profit as it can to siphon off to the people with lots of money to reinvest into making more money, and you're a consumer. And Newcastle United was Mike Ashley's cash cow. So there's part of it about that. Part of it was also about sort of solidarity. And I remember about the Unite stuff that we did about Shirebrook and how I think they got a banner in the stadium, Sports Direct shame or something like that. It was things like that. It was sort of raising that sort of solidarity around, actually, there's massive amounts of exploitation going on and trade unions are doing something about it. So seeing football fans sharing videos about what was happening at Shirebrook in like utter outrage and just tapping into that sort of, because people in the Northeast, people everywhere, I think, values-wise, are socialists. They love the NHS, they know right and wrong, and they support that. And seeing things what Mike Ashley was doing at Shirebrook tapped into sort of that basic sense of what's right and what's wrong. And all of a sudden, they were more aware about it. And then football fans talking about trade union activity and things like that. It was utterly beautiful to see. And I think we brought a load of fans down to Durham Miners Gala. So we spoke to Jeremy's speechwriter and talked about getting stuff about Newcastle United in there. And he mentioned it in the speech at Durham Miners Gala. And then all these Newcastle United fans who'd never been to this type of event before, just jumping up and down and celebrating. And yeah, again, sharing these things. And I think what happened and what worked well with it, and it was massive amounts of improvement. And I think a wider issue of community organising within the party came up within that campaign. We had Jeremy sitting down with football fans, listening to them, listening to what was going on, and being authentic and building that relationship up with them and getting them to the table to say what they think. And I mean, where some of the issues were that the regional office wasn't particularly supportive of what I was doing, to say the least. And the sort of the party machine wanted, right, we need to get in the election slogans, what we're going to do for what. It was just really, that sense was false. But in terms of that thing, it was lovely to see. And an example of where campaigning around football can go wrong is if you sort of the Amnesty International stuff about Newcastle United getting taken over by Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. And Amnesty International and I've got friends who used to work for Community Organising Unit, now working with Amnesty on their sort of campaign work. They weren't involved in this bit, but they used football as a platform to get their politics out there, and it really pissed fans off. They sort of pulled up a soapbox and started preaching at fans, and it was really, really unappreciated. But in terms of that value thing, look, Newcastle United fans thinks it's disgusting about some of the things that Saudi government do. But preaching at them isn't going to get support. And it's about the fans need to build that voice against the Saudi regime. You cannot force the politics on it. It's got to come from them.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on a lot of stuff there, Callum, but the thing that I suppose a lot of people might look at what we're talking about, good socialists who have no interest in football, and they'll be thinking, why are you obsessing with this kind of, like the opium of the people sort of thing, it's a distraction, it's bread and circuses and all that sort of stuff. And there's obviously elements of truth in that, but also I wanted to talk about why we're so bothered about football in a way to try and explain that. I know it's probably not possible in like short time we've got, but for instance, I think I felt my first sense of solidarity at a football match, like real kind of sense of, the whole crowd singing Bladen Races at the top of their voices, and you're sitting there as a little lad, and you're listening to the, I was on the benches in the east stand. That was where I sat with my dad, and probably didn't have a kind of, really, really close relationship with my dad, but during that 2 hours we were, that was me and his time. But then also looking at the Gallagher and thinking, they're singing the same as me, and they're like, all those, I mean, obviously there's a little bit of kind of male culture about all this as well. And let's not and I think it is really good that you have lots more women at the game now. But like when I was there, it was very kind of like, it was that feeling of like, we're all in this, we're all believing the same thing, we're all singing the same thing. And I don't know whether that's just hard to explain to people that haven't felt that. Callum with a K, what was can you remember your kind of first experience like that, and how that affected you? You're muted, by the way.
Promised myself I'd never do that. Sorry. Amateur, wasting our time, lads. Yeah, I remember. So my granddad, Chris, who came over here, I think 69, Irish, from Longford in Ireland. Always a massive red. My dad always a massive red, so I was brought up a massive red. So that was like a thing for the three of us, the three kind of blokes in the family. It was all women apart from that. So you're right, he has got a male culture sort of thing of it. Oh, you're the football fans, And I remember we'd be in pubs when I was like 5 or 6, and I'd be playing pool or playing a game or something while everyone's watching the game. And then when I'd hear a load of cheering, I'd run in and go, yeah, just cheer with them. And those were my earliest memories of it. But then I remember going to my granddad's with my dad, with my mum, and my dad and my granddad were both stood there, and it was like they were at a funeral. And I remember this clear as day. I remember going, what's up with you? And they were nearly crying. And my granddad went, have you not heard? I said, what? And he went, Eric's left. Eric's retired. Cantona. And they were so distraught. And I mean, I couldn't get my head around it at the time. I think I was 6 or 7, but it's one of my earliest memories. I remember thinking, what's all this about? But I need to get more involved in this. I remember, to be one of the lads, I thought, I'm not this upset that Eric Cantona's left. I was too young. So it was that season that I really started kind of just becoming addicted and thinking, this is what I have to do. That's how it felt. It felt like a religion. It's like, this is what you have to do, because the two men in my life who I love to bits and who I look up to find it this important, that I need to find it that important. And I remember actually thinking kind of that way in my old little 6-7-year-old self. But the first game of the 98 to 99 season, the season for United, at Old Trafford was Leicester, and my dad took me. You know what? I've never realised the significance of this, actually. So just dead quickly, a bit of context. My mum's mum died when I was 6 months old, and my mum was 18. She died tragically in a road accident. And then in mid-1998, early 1998, sorry. So before the 98-99 season, my dad's mum died, and she was only 40. And my dad was kind of in his mid-20s. So it was like a really tragic, awful time. And I remember being in the Stretford End with my dad playing against Leicester, and we were getting beat 2-0 against Leicester. And in like the 88th minute, I remember we got a free kick, and Beckham was lining up this free kick. And I remember praying to both of my nanas. I was thinking, if you're up there, then please, come on, this is my first game that I've been to. Come on, please, Nana Magga, Nana Philly. I remember praying to him like it was yesterday, man. And Beckham's flung in a free kick, and Teddy Sheringham got on the end of it and made it 2-1. and the place erupted. It was unbelievable. Old Trafford was just getting redeveloped then as well, so there might have been the odd extra tier. And it was just absolute pandemonium. And then in like the 90th, 91st minute, we got another free kick, and it was Beckham, and I was praying again to him, and he scored. Beckham scored and made it 2-2. And it was like, that was because of my prayers to my Hannahs. That's how I felt at the time. And then afterwards, we were walking down Matt Busby Way, and I remember being on my dad's shoulders, and there was just a sea of people singing, there's only one David Beckham, one David. And it was like, that was glorious. That was like it was almost like a spiritual moment, because to me, in my head at that time, I prayed to my nanas who are no longer with us, and United managed to get a draw out of it. So yeah, since then, I mean, that's the kind of best way that I can explain. And I didn't even kind of prepare that. I've only just come to that conclusion about that's probably why football is so important to me, because and those connections were made to kind of dead relatives and stuff. It's that spiritual, absolutely glorious. One of the best days of my life. That nice one for reminding me, Ben.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of I started watching Newcastle in 1981, and so within a year of starting to support them, we had Keegan's debut and so on. And that was, I mean, Keegan was like, there's a lot of things to dislike about Kevin Keegan, his politics, and he loved Thatcher and all sorts of. But I'll never ever, I'll always feel a little bit of love for him as well, because that guy understood like the emotion of football. And I think like I felt really upset like when he went, his last kind of incarnation at Newcastle was just really, really tragic, and he deserved better than that, really. But as a football person, I'm talking about. And I just remember going to that first game, and I queued up, and I was, it was sweltering hot, queued up since 12 o'clock, 3 hours in the queue, basically, to get into the Gallagher. No ticket or anything, just paying on the, on this, basically a bank, and being swept away. And when you think about the danger of that and all that, and obviously Hillsborough, and it was right that we changed all that, but it was incredible to be part of that. And then I got home, I got back on the bus. I wasn't with my dad at this point, but I got back on the bus, and I came in the house, and my mum said, "How was the game?" Not even knowing like what was going on, and I just puked everywhere, all over the kitchen. The sheer emotion of that, and I think that is like it was like it definitely. Keegan understood the spiritual thing. He said of that game that because he scored the winner as well, which is just obviously he had to. But he said the fans sucked the ball in the net basically, and like he knew what he was saying there. It was, but like I think for a lot of young fans of that, I think Shearer was. Oh no, Shearer it was the last game, wasn't he? Was when he was on the pitch and everything. But like a load of like young fans would have gone to that game and never felt never felt the same ever again. Like it changed everything, kind of thing. What about you, Callum? You're obviously a lot younger than me.
Yeah, so because Kevin Keegan was a formative part of my love of football as well, but that was the Entertainers. I was sort of 96 or 6 years old, so just at that time, similar to Callum, where you understood football was a game, you understood what people supported it, you supported it because everyone else supported it, but what that meant to you, probably is that formative age where it starts to mean something to you. And for me, football wasn't necessarily about sort of going to the games, because I didn't have a season ticket when the first season ticket I got when I was about 12, I think it was. But in that time of the Entertainers, it was my whole life. Like football was finish school, well, go to school, break times, play football, finish school, hop on your bike, ride down to the park, play football. And it was just everything. Everything was centered around football. And it is that sort of collective experience. My first match was a bit more boring than that. I think it was 1-0. We were playing Spurs 97, 98 season, I think it was. Warren Barton got a tap in at the 90th minute on the back post. And it was just that connection with people that I've never felt before. And it was singing sort of Blade of Races. And it was just that collective voice that I'd never experienced, didn't know it existed until I started sort of going to football matches. And I think with Newcastle as well, and I say this as a Newcastle fan, and I think I put Newcastle on a pedestal in terms of football sport, but I probably am very biased. But it's that connection to the city, the fact that St James is right in the centre of Newcastle, and if we score, the whole city hears we score. You could be in the middle of a shopping centre and you can hear the fact that Newcastle have just went one up. And it is just that Newcastle is a football club, but it's also that my wider connection to where I live and where I love to live. And it ties me to there. And I think sort of as I grow up, and like I said, my friends were all around football. I had season tickets with me friends growing up. And it was just my whole life. And I remember probably one of the, I mean, I feel like a bit shit really saying it because it's got nowhere in terms of that emotional connection with Callum just described there, which was absolutely beautiful, by the way. But I remember it was Sir Bobby Robson's funeral and I was living with my mates, 18, 19 years old, and was living with my mates and all sort of like crappy jobs, living a bit of a, not a squat or anything like that, but it was fairly sort of like student living, sitting with all my mates watching Sir Bobby Robson's funeral, and we're all sitting there flooding with tears. And it was just sort of like, I've never seen any of my friends cry, probably would never see them cry again. But to me, Bobby Robson was sort of, I know, he was just someone who I had this connection to, never met the bloke, but I absolutely love him. Absolutely love him. Yeah, and it's everything. And now I've got kids myself, and it was my little girl the other day who was blading races. I was watching the Jack Charlton thing they had on BBC, and I was watching it with her. And at the end, he sings "Blade and Races," despite the fact that he's got really progressive dementia at that point. And my little girl sort of had heard the song before. She's 7 now, and then we started singing. She was getting all the words wrong. I said, pause. Right. We started going through it, and then she wanted to learn Blade and Races, and it was just such a like that connection. It's a generational thing. It's passed down. Yeah, it's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, you know, Callum, there's a bit of a story about that, the Jack Charlton thing. I mean, I said this on Twitter, but my father-in-law wrote the version that Jack Charlton was listening to, where he sang it. Sorry, so when I first he actually, he's died now, sadly, but he was one of these old school fans that used to go to Sunderland one week and Newcastle the next, and I was like, but apparently it was people used to do that. But when I first started going out with Charlotte, I would go around the house and he would like basically be there with the piano and singing the Blade Runner, and he would test me because he knew I was a big Newcastle fan on the verses, and of course I didn't know any of them at all. But it's a really important song, and I said this with the People's Assembly event that we had, that I feel like, I mean, I'm really sorry if Callum, or if you know the people that write that sing the version that they play at the ground, but I just feel like you should have respect for that song because it's so important to Geordies, and I love the fact, I think it was. It's a singer that was very similar to my father-in-law that used to sing it in live in the ground, and that was great. That was a great bit of entertainment, and it gets people then whipped up. And one of the things that they do now, I don't know if they do this at Old Trafford, but at Newcastle, they play music right up until kickoff. So they play they play the Ramones and things like "Hey Ho, Let's Go," which I love that, but it's like part of my childhood as well. But I don't want to hear it like right up to kickoff and then deadly silence, and it's stuff like that the people that run the club, don't understand what might generate. So maybe you need that silence before kickoff to get people to sing. It's not always as simple as like, if there's silence in the ground, let's fill it with pipe music. It's stuff like that. I suppose we could we could talk about how they get it wrong.
Well, just to come in, I mean, about 6 or 7 years ago, the United fan lobby, because there's many United fan groups who speak with the club, the Red Army, Man United Supporters Trust, Stretford End Flags. they got the club successfully to stop playing anything over the tannoy 5 minutes before kickoff. Right. So there'd be a great moment where it'd just go stop dead, and then you'd know that was when everyone's time to pick up there. And Old Trafford's notorious for a bad atmosphere since they redeveloped the ground, and we all know the reasons behind that. All-seater stadia, tickets, people can't kind of just go in and meet the mates. It's the structure around it's much kind of makes it much more difficult than it would have been when you were first going, Ben, when you were queuing up for 3 hours and you just go and meet your mates and you'd stand in a certain place in a stand and all that. But they have done that, and I think that's moving forward. I don't know whether you're going to come to what the conclusions can be later. So maybe we'll hang on. But I wanted to go back to the original kind of point of your question was about the contradictions, wasn't it? About how we as socialists go and support big clubs and we've talked about the romance of football and why we love it. But with United, I have to say, there were massive left-wing connotations with being a United fan growing up. So I come from an Irish Republican background, so the negative relationship between England as a football team and Manchester United when I was growing up was something that we thrived off. So England's scapegoats at big tournaments have usually been United players, haven't they? If you go back to Beckham in 1998 when he got sent off against Argentina, Cristiano Ronaldo for Portugal when he got Rooney sent off, Phil Neville getting death threats and stuff. I think he gave away a penalty in one tournament. And then what United fans did around that was, they hated the nationalism thing when it came to England. They couldn't stand it. So, we hate England more than you was always kind of belted out whenever we played Celtic. It was all about the Republic of Mancunia. It was Manchester as its own country. Republic spelt with a K with a hammer and sickle on the end of it. Red Army, with Cantona, there was French flags all over the stadium. When Tevez was there, Gabriel Ain't say there was Argentina flags and chants of Argentina. And as we'd go to away grounds and there'd be, what we called kind of little Englanders with their England flags singing England songs and stuff, and we'd start singing Argentina and next to the stuff coming out about the Falklands and all that, and it was all just to wind England fans up, So for me, it fueled my politics, being a United fan. It was brilliant. And then something changed about 10 years ago where all of a sudden football fans just seemed to get kind of across the board right-wing, man. There was just a new wave of youngsters that come through who were probably just a few years younger than me. We've always sung songs about Liverpool, and I've sung songs about Liverpool fans when I was younger that would now be looked at as proper Tory and right-wing, and I won't sing them anymore. Because when you're a kid, you just get kind of caught up in it, don't you? But there was, the self-pity city remarks from Boris Johnson. I remember seeing in the paper a few years ago, loads of United fans turned up with pictures of Boris Johnson, and something changed. And that element, that left-wing element's no longer really there with the core support of United at the minute. It is, but not as much as it used to be. And there is a bit of a split with people who will happily sing Tory, Man United, and there'll be people kicking off in the grounds over it. And, it's not as kind of uniformed as it used to be. But that was a big part of my politics growing up. It was like, yeah, great. We hate England more than you was one of the chants. That was hilarious to sing in the ground.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of like, I've thought about this quite a lot, but I think football was quite formative in my politics as well. Like when I was at sixth form, the sack the board stuff was in full swing. So that was the first time really that Newcastle fans had, although I think actually there was some stuff in the 70s as well, but Newcastle had a really kind of, they had a very kind of like establishment, old school, traditional Tory board, and it had done for years and years. And the fans in the 80s, kind of organised. It was a very well organised campaign. A guy called Mark Jensen who became editor of the mag and so on. He was behind it, but and I learned about campaigning through that. I learned about collectivism, but also like winning campaigns, because we started to. And in some ways, I mean, it's complicated. I'm surprised nobody. Well, actually, I don't know if people have written stuff on it, but it's a story to be told that. But eventually, that kind of led to John Hall taking over the club. The Magpie Group came through that, really, those protests, and then obviously then we ended up with, that was the kind of first money men as well, but like, in a serious sense, the modern sense of that. So it kind of backfired a little bit in some ways with Freddie Shepherd and all of that. But there was obviously a really great period as well. I mean, Callum, were you kind of aware of that?
No, that was a bit sort of before my time. I sort of got the history of the Magpie group, the original Magpie group, when I got more involved in sort of fan organising. But I guess sort of on that, go back to sort of that original question around sort of why this is important for the left. I think you've also got to understand as well of why this is important for the right, and around how the right wing have organised around football. If you look at sort of the EDL and where that was formed, and if you look around sort of the Pegida movement, and it can be weaponized against for really sinister means. Football lads, was it football lads against whatever it was?
Football Lads Alliance.
Yeah, Football Lads Alliance, like a really, really far right fascist group organising around football on a very superficial level. It was purely a vehicle to push their hatred, really. So you've got to look at it like that, and that's sort of, I guess, easily counted because it is that feeling of right and wrong. And I remember it was a Pegida march in Newcastle where Bill Corcoran, who runs the fan food bank, got on stage with his Newcastle United, and Bill's a huge man, like he's a giant, utter giant. And he starts singing, "Newcastle United will never be defeated." And it just rang around the city, and it was utterly beautiful, like one of the really most just sort of superb moments in my life. And again, if you look at sort of electoral politics now, what Jeremy was doing with community organising was the authentic way of doing that. And Jeremy was really, really enthusiastic about community organising, around organising football fans, because he knows how much it means to communities. But equally, the Conservatives know that as well. And if you've seen sort of the Conservatives have been outflanking us in terms of the Super League and the position on that. They came up with the 51% sort of fan ownership. They never have any intention of doing it, but if they put a few headlines out there, fans start to think, oh, Boris Johnson's got we're back on this. Got no interest in that at all. In fact, the rumour has that he was actually in favour of the Super League when he met with Richard Masters in it was Man United's
Ed Woodward.
Yeah. So yeah, he and then what Labour's position was, we'll write an angry letter, sign this petition, or send an angry letter to the football of the market standards agency around sort of monopolisation. And it's utterly pathetic. But the Conservatives know that, and it was around when Bury went under, and the rumour has it that Boris Johnson was actually very eager for the state to step in and take over Bury and not let it go under, because he knows how important that is to get support for other things that he wants to do. And I'm not saying that we should, as a Labour Party, try to sort of just step in and use it, similar to the Amnesty International, use it as a platform to push our politics. But what we should be doing is looking at community organising and how fan organising can build power, can push progressive politics, and do it from the ground up, the proper way of doing it. But yeah, I think that's something that can't be overlooked, and you'll see it more and more. Liverpool Football Club today have done something about a work scheme that they're running with the Conservatives. Didn't do it in Liverpool, like, do you? But they're willing to do it, and they're willing to push it.
And Callum, sorry, just to like touch on the Saudi Arabia stuff as well. So I've never really felt like I've known whether Newcastle fans are, predominantly, like Callum was saying about Man United fans and that kind of left-wing culture, whether it's kind of superficial or not, but it just, it's like a feeling about the club. And I've never really known. I don't know if you feel like this, but with Newcastle, that there is a kind of like political sense behind the club. I know Sunderland fans will say, that the Sunderland are the progressive club, and on community level, it's kind of, some of that is true, isn't it? About Newcastle being quite distant and not having done the kind of community foundation stuff and things like that in the past, at least.
No, and I think with and it's a gross generalisation. It's just based on my observations, I guess. But I think the politics within the city of Newcastle is very much based upon what they feel is right and wrong. And the majority of those times, they're absolutely spot on. The times where there's a clear sort of this decision, they know what's sort of right and what's the right thing to do. But at the same time, when you've got complex issues like Saudi Arabia and their involvement in sports washing at Newcastle United, that's a very, very complicated issue. And it's an issue on the background of over a decade now of the soul being ripped out of something that they love. And I think even myself, who I'm not supportive of Saudi Arabia taking over Newcastle, I'm really not, despite the fact that I would love not to see Newcastle United sign a Neymar or a Mbappe or anything like that. I genuinely don't want that. I just want a football club that respects the city, a football owner that respects the fans, respects the people, and where fans' interests are at the heart of what happens at a football club. That's all I want. And I think with Saudi Arabia, part of me thinks we'll get that because they want to project themselves as this sort of force of good and doing some really, really progressive things. In reality, they're not. So the things that happen in Saudi Arabia are already discussing, but I can understand why fans are a little bit blinkered to that at the minute, just because they want change. They want the football club that they know they love back in their control again, and back for them having a level of say over it. So I've got no issue with fans who support the idea of Saudi Arabia taking over club, because I can understand exactly where they're coming from. But at the same time, it's really heartbreaking that this is the situation we're in. We've got a choice between one bastard or another to run our football clubs. And yeah, it is. And I think there's potentially benefits of Saudi Arabia being able to take over a football club, in that for the first time ever, we're going to be exposed to the public and we're going to be potentially held account to some of the things that we did by people who go to the games. Things around sort of, like I said, that progressive sort of view of right and wrong. Newcastle United fans didn't think it's right to stone or to have sort of such harsh penalties about being gay. That they know that's utterly disgusting. So potentially there is an avenue it's out of fans' controls anyway, whether who takes over or what. But potentially there is avenues there to do some work and actually shift Saudi Arabia a little bit. I don't know. Maybe there's a little bit of part of me that thinks actually it wouldn't be such a terrible thing, but I'm not confident that it will. I think, like I said, it's not going to be good for anyone. Saudi Arabia taking over any football club.
Callum also Callum with a K. Just also want to talk a bit about like how the game's moved away from working class people. So I had a spell where I did boycott, and I gave up my season ticket, partly because I couldn't afford it, but also to make a statement and all that. And I just had enough of the club. But when I came back and I sat in pretty much my same seat, it was dead. And there was lots of people there that were kind of just the way that they came to the game. A lot of them were wearing kind of suits and Roy Keane famously talked about the prawn sandwich brigade. I feel some of that as well at Newcastle, not in every part of the ground, and it's quite complex. But what do you think about that? Because obviously a lot of it's about being priced out, but I suppose it's also about everything that goes with it as well. So some of the atmosphere, like the kind of sanitization of those grounds, has probably put people off as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's right with the prawn sandwich brigade comment. All United fans welcome that because he is right. And the context of that was in his book. He says that the United away support, and I'm sure you two will agree, United's away support is brilliant, and it's one of the loudest in the country. I've been to St James's with United a few times. My first away game was when I was 13 or 14, was up at St James's Park, and it was incredible. I've never seen anything like it. I've been to loads of games at Old Trafford, and been really disappointed at the lack of singing, and but finally getting to an away game was unbelievable. And that's why I've got a lot of love for Newcastle as well. I think just quickly, that season would have been, it was Rooney's first season. It was when he was playing with Van Nistelrooy. So it would have been, I think, 2003, 2004, maybe. And we ended up winning 3-1. But we went up early, 1-0 up early, and then Shearer scored right in front of the Gallagher. And I remember seeing Shearer run off from the miles away up in the gods that where you stick us, you bastards. Well, I remember him seeing run off with his hand in the air, and even as a 14-year-old or whatever it was at the time, I remember thinking that's special. I've seen Shearer score, because even then he was a Premier League legend. But and that's what Keane was saying. He was like, in his book, the away fans are great, but Old Trafford's crap. It's full of the prawn sandwich brigade, and he's right. And it started with the Taylor report that was commissioned to look into what happened at Hillsborough, where they came out and said that, right, okay, rather than Hillsborough being down to poor stewarding, poor policing, poor stadium infrastructure, it was down to the fans. So we need to put them in seats, not let them stand up, not let them drink. And that's why that kind of sanitisation, that's where it first started. And then that coincided, it almost ran parallel, didn't it, to the creation of the Premier League and Sky stepping in, and then English football being this kind of global brand. And within a couple of years, it was the most successful and highest grossing league in the world. So then you had people flying in from all over the world to watch these football matches in England in the Premier League. And slowly but surely, well, not even slowly but surely, it happened quite quickly. Within the space of probably 8-9 years, football grounds went from local people supporting their local team, having that local energy, which, you both touched on earlier as to why we love our clubs. And it's because they're embedded in the local communities, and you feel like you're flying the flag for Newcastle, and, we're flying the flag for Manchester. It went from that to a customer experience where there was, they could sell the hospitality, they could sell the museum tours, they could sell the megastore, they could, they could bring people in from all over the world to come and watch these games. And bit by bit, it was less about fans. And there was, I remember him sticking an executive box right in the centre of the Stretford end, right where the fans were. So they moved actual fans out the Stretford end and put these executive boxes in there. And now there's even now, when we were at the demo a few weeks ago at Liverpool, you could see they were building more executive boxes wherever they can. And that's what football became more about. And bit by bit, it became more of a business, didn't it? And it was taken away from us. And it's not felt like it was ours for a long time. When the Glazers took over, FC United was created by a lot of disgruntled United fans who just thought that was a bridge too far, who were already pissed off. They were pissed off with the way the game was going before the Glazers took over in 2005. And I went to a lot of FC United games in the first year. They played at Bury, at Gig Lane at Bury, funnily enough. You mentioned Bury earlier, one of the oldest football clubs in the country, left to rot. And it was brilliant, and it still is. I go to FC United every now and then. It's a brilliant community club. It's exactly what you'd want out of a football club. They still support United. They just won't put any money into them. And as depressing as it has been at Old Trafford over the years, and there's been some terrible days. My dad won't even go anymore. He just goes, "Sod that," and it's too crap. There's no point in him spending £100 altogether, on beer, food, and your ticket, to sit there and be depressed and looked at like you've got two heads if you try and start singing. But what's happened over the last few years is, to be fair to the club, to United, they have been in conversation with the fans. They have been, allowing them to try out singing sections here and there. They have committed to bringing in safe standing. But all these were kind of little things where they were just trying to keep fans happy. Now, it does feel like something's tipped. I don't know about you, but it does feel like something's tipped. It feels like we're back in control somehow. Mm-hmm. All this madness of the past few weeks is, I don't want to speak too early, but it does feel like it's going in a direction where we're going to be much happier as football fans over the next 10 years. Like you say, you've got the Tory government opening up a fan-led review into football, and that's because the Tories are clever. This lot that are in at the minute, yeah, they are daft. But at the same time, I know it's a bit of a, we've got two things running against each other now. They're the biggest bunch of buffoons in the world, but at the same time, they do know how to stay in power. And like you said, Callum, straight away they were like, right, fan-led review, let's do it. So it'd be interesting to see what comes out of the fan-led review. But I don't know about you guys, but I do feel empowered as a football fan at the minute. It does feel like it's going in the right direction. I can't speak for the likes of Newcastle fans and Mike Ashley, but United fans are looking forward to seeing what the next few years, has got in store. If it's not Glazers out completely, and I don't think it will be, or Joel Glazer wouldn't be coming to speak to fans, it will be a much healthier relationship than it has been. They do seem to have been shook to the core. So maybe it will feel more like a working class sport in the next few years. If these owners, Ben, can sell the brand of football around the world and make as much money as they can through TV rights and stuff, but the match day experience feels like a community experience and feels like it's for the fans and fans are happy, then maybe that's the equilibrium and maybe that's the compromise that we need to come to.
I just want to check actually, because I know we're running a bit late, and I'm assuming that you can stay around for another 10 minutes. But obviously, if you if you need to fill up, if you've got, because what I want to get onto really is the last bit in the jigsaw. Really is just to talk about some of the ways that we'd like football to be in the future, changes, and Callum's already touched on some of that there. And Callum, with the C, what do you think that for instance, at Newcastle, do you feel like there's a route back in for working class fans that can't afford £40 a ticket, and do you think that's a possibility now?
No, I'm less hopeful than Callum. I think we've got obviously different experiences, different fan bases. We're still owned by Mike Ashley, and you've got a little glimmer of hope that things might change. But no, I don't think it will. I think we're going to continue to see football being moved in the direction of generating profit for the owners of the football club. And I can't see that changing. I sort of grew up in a time where Sky Sports really got a hold over football, and I remember growing up and my mum and dad having Sky to watch the football. Absolutely loved it. And then the hiked the price up at one point, early 2000s. And all of a sudden on a Saturday, and we were in the Champions League and Europa as well, sit in my dad's car and put the radio on and just listen to a football match. And then that was my first experience of all of a sudden something that I love being moved out of something I could experience. And I think you've got that, and that's not going to change. And I think that the other thing that's going to change as well over time is football on paper is probably one of the biggest meritocracies there is. If you're good at football, regardless of where you're from, what background you're from, you can make it. Very few of them do, and the vast majority of the ones get tossed by the wayside. And really, really, from a mental health perspective, the number of former footballers who didn't quite make it I've seen professionally is unbelievable. Massive issues with gambling, massive issues with alcohol, massive issues with mental health, because they've been brought up all this life. You're going to make it, Bonnie lad. You're going to do it. And then, actually, you're not anymore. Off you go. Massive impacts on mental health. But I guess they're just a product that's no longer in need and cast aside. But what I think we're going to see is that actually the ability to play the game is being taken away from working class people as well now. And if you look at the fact that in terms of being able to have a game of five-a-side, you've got to book it, you've got to pay for it. It's like 30, 40 quid to book a pitch and stuff like that. People can't afford that. Working class kids can't afford that. I used to have the benefit of going down and playing on a playing field or down in the park. Like, playing fields are getting built up on left, right and centre by developers. And I think football is going to get more and more removed from working class people because of the ownership model that we've got, where it is that billionaires' playground and they can do whatever they want. But also from a grassroots perspective, the actual ability to play football, councils are under more and more pressure to maintain pitches, and with their sort of budget cuts that they've got through central government, there's a huge issue on the grassroots game as well.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean that's a bit depressing, Callum, but but you're right, you are right, and but so what about if we're gonna, I mean, I suppose one thing is that we might want to create different types of football clubs. So some of that has happened, like White Hawk, for instance, in anti-fascist kind of football clubs, and FC United being an example. We've done some stuff with Durham City, actually, anti-racist campaigning with them, which has been really good. Unfortunately, they're in big financial trouble as well. So, we're on a much smaller scale than we're talking about. But so the there is that side of things. So, like, maybe there's people should go and watch local, smaller teams and so on. But then there's also, like, what if we had this kind of if we did get back control, what sort of things would we want? Callum with a K. What sort of things would we want our clubs to be like? There's also kind of ownership models, which is a huge issue, but also, like, what would the stadiums be like, and what would the fans, the fan forums and stuff like that be like?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what this fan-led review does. Obviously, the big priority, if we could all click our fingers now, it'd be, like you say, the ownership model and the 50 plus 1% ownership model. That'd be fantastic. But Callum was totally right. The grassroots game is totally in disarray. So what needs to be legislated as well is the payback from these big clubs, from the Premier League, from Sky, back into the grassroots game. I'm sure there's probably a corporate policy that they've got where they do throw a couple of quid in here and there, but it needs to be a huge percentage to save that. 30, 40 quid for a five-a-side pitch, I'd love that. It's 50, 60, 70 quid where I'm from. It's an absolute nightmare. So you'd want to see that, and Callum's right, that if that's not sorted quickly, and I think Gary Neville and Richard Scudamore have been looking into something like some sort of charter to try and save grassroots football. Not Richard Scudamore, can't remember who it is. But if that's not sorted quickly, then you're right. There'll be no football fans and no English football players anymore in the next 20 years. In terms of the match day experience, I think there's things that it's started to edge in the right direction. Safe standing needs to come in quickly. You'll know if you're stood up cheering a last minute winner or something, then your legs get shredded to bits, don't they? And people are falling all over the show and stuff like that. And there's a way that they can do safe standing now, which doesn't mean that you're getting dragged in this wave like you used to have Ben, or anything that could lead to anything like Hillsborough or anything like that. So that needs to come in quickly. There needs to be a lot more trust in football fans. You're always going to get dickheads. Everywhere you're going to get dickheads, but there needs to be a lot more trust in football fans to be able to have a flipping pint while you're watching the game. Have some decent beers, let them feel like let them own that. And I touched on this before. That match day experience, just let the fans own it. The rest of you could give 5% of Old Trafford to enough of the fans, and they'd all be happy. Just to have 4,000 or 5,000 in one end where everyone can go, have a beer, take their own flags in. They'd be more than happy with that. Little things like I touched on before, like turning the tannoy off 5 minutes before kickoff, not belting out all these kind of cheesy songs and stuff. What does need to happen is cheaper tickets. The 20s plenty campaign seemed to die off a little bit. One of the first kind of bits of football campaigning that I remember seeing, you Callum or Ben might remember this better than me, was Man United fans and Newcastle fans marching at St James's about in protest against high ticket prices. You look at Germany, but I think a season ticket at Bayern Munich something like €100. When Bayern Munich played Arsenal in the Champions League a few years ago, their ticket was more for Arsenal away at the Emirates than it was for one of their season tickets. When you look at actual football fans and how much they pay for their match day experience and how much money that actually generates, in the grand scheme of things, there should be enough wiggle room to keep football fans sweet, to keep match-going football fans sweet. There should be enough wiggle room. And the fact that there isn't at the minute, and I'm paying £6 for one of them small bottles of Heineken at Old Trafford and £4 for a disgusting pie, is disgraceful. They've took the piss for far too long, and I'm hoping that we've got a bit of a tipping point here where it moves into more of a more positive situation for match-going football fans. And as depressing as Callum's assessment of grassroots football was, it's totally right, and that is something that needs to be addressed as well.
Callum, anything to add to that? Because I think he's done a very good job there in summarising.
No, that's exactly it. I think whether it's 51% or whether it's golden share sort of owner, we need to look at that because it works elsewhere. And the difficulty is, and I think it's an easy comparison to make, sort of we need the German model. You actually look at the German model, it's went backwards. Fan ownership used to be a hell of a lot higher, but it's whittled down to 51%. So it's not a straightforward crossover. And then there's the idea of fans on boards. Again, voting rights, that's not something that actually probably have much sway. And then you've got fans who are making decisions on behalf of other fans, and then that can get a really toxic relationship as well, and not particularly helpful and very divisive. So I think we definitely do need to start talking about where it is sort of like a golden chair where fans do have a legitimate say over the club. Like I said, it's about that identity. It's about I support Newcastle because it's part of where I'm from. It's that connection to the area where I love. Why should Mike Ashley, who has no connection to the area, have all the say over what happens at my club? So I definitely think, and I think it's incredible that we are in a position now where we're genuinely talking about it. And Corbyn had a big part of that. If you look at in Labour Party policy, when Jeremy came out with fan ownership, Labour Party policy actually wasn't fan ownership. That brief was under Tom Watson, I think, at the time. He was deputy for sport and culture, wasn't he?
Culture, yeah.
Yeah. Our policy didn't actually shift too much from 2017 to 2019, but Jeremy came out and he talked about fan ownership, and that hadn't been talked about in England on that political level for a very, very long time. And there's that thing of Jeremy's always on the right side of history. I think it's a massive cliche that we'll probably over rely on sometimes, but he's right. He was right. And then all of a sudden you've got Conservatives talking about the need for that as well. So I think that's something. In terms of other things that I agree completely with what Callum's said there, one thing I would like to go, and I've touched upon it before, around young footballers coming through the system, that needs to change. The academy system that we've got is utterly disgusting. It's sort of a farm for working class kids to sort of come through, and if you don't make it, you're literally just tossed by the wayside. There's a thing about Newcastle United, and the focus on Newcastle United, and it could have been any club, in fairness. It was about a young lad who came up from London, got signed, and I think he was like in the Guardian's their top prospect from each club. He was Newcastle United's top prospect. So we shift him up from London, no family up here, no connections up here, put him in sort of accommodation, 15, 16 years old. He does his ACL in, never gets back to full fitness, and he's sort of tossed by the wayside. It's utterly disgusting in the academy system that you got, where you've got these sort of mega farms like Man City have and like Chelsea have had. We need to get rid of them, put that and put it back to how it used to work, where you came through Wallsend Boys Club, like so many great football players who never actually went on to play for Newcastle United, Michael Carrick being one of them. That model worked, and it was less damaging to society, to the players who didn't make it as well, because the current system we've got is just awful. It's brutal.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, I think one of the reasons why that doesn't get much high profile, and people, is because there's a sense in which people think, well, you had a chance, you were there, and like there's that kind of little bit of jealousy that people have, and he said, well, why would you be complaining? Okay, so things didn't work out, but me, I would love to be in that position where I had a chance. You know what I mean? But it is, you're absolutely right, Callum, that the way young players are treated is terrible, and what that needs is a load of regulation, isn't it? Which is what the model of football that we have at the moment doesn't want and rejects aggressively. So that's definitely worth saying that. Right. Okay. I think we've sort of come to the end of an hour and 20 minutes or whatever. I've lost sense of time now. But we could obviously go on, and I don't know if there's anything else that people want to say, but anything to end on. But it's been really, really interesting, and I'm glad we got the chance to talk about some things in depth as well, because I think quite often when you do kind of panel stuff, you get like your 2 minutes or whatever if you're lucky. But this has been really interesting. Anything to add before we leave?
Yeah. I mean, fair play for kind of having these long form conversations, Ben. I think there's probably you should maybe throw this on a podcast as well, because I think I've listened to quite a few of these Socialist Telly things that you're doing now, and it is bang on, and it is different to these sorts of, like you say, these panel shows, but that panel format when people have got a certain amount of time, and I have enjoyed this. I think the only thing I would want to add, and it comes from what Callum was just saying about young footballers, is it made me think of young football fans. It's not nowhere near as serious as the young footballer thing. That does need addressing. But every club, and it should be legislated really, and for their own good, should have a charter for young football fans. So there should be a couple of thousand in every stadium of kids, basically, who can get the tickets for next to nothing. Who can all go in there, and maybe the schools share tickets or something like that. And then bit by bit, they'll become a part of the club and they'll really enjoy the club. And I think that's something that could help save our game as well, because, I've got a younger brother who's 11, 12 now. I took him to his first game. It was one of the last games before lockdown. Bruno Fernandes scored his first goal, and it was electric, and he loved it, but he's not even asked about it since. When I was a kid, everybody was into football. Everybody, and there's that many distractions nowadays that football as an industry needs to do a lot of work to rekindle that magic and grab kids again. So that would be the thing that I'd end on. But yeah, nice one for this, chaps. I've really enjoyed it.
I think just on the young football fans as well, without over romanticizing anything, but I remember when I had my season ticket, which was, I think my first season ticket was like something like 25-30 quid or something, absolutely, when I was a kid. But and we were on these benches, and it wasn't just a family ticket. So there was like, there was much older people interspersed in there, but there was a load of kids there. And then and there was this guy that I only ever knew as Grandad, that's what. And he used to just tell people stories all the time throughout the match, and the kids would be listening to him, and he'd be talking about Jackie Milburn and stuff like that. And I know that sounds like a bit syrupy and stuff, but it genuinely happened probably all over football stadiums. And then when I came back, sort of after being at university and boycotting and everything, came back, and everybody's in there, everybody's 40, 50, 60, years old. So it's like, and obviously I'm at that point now, but there's just not the kids, sitting in amongst everybody and the chatting and having a laugh. There's the little pockets of it, but it's a hell of an outlay, isn't it? For if you've got a kid, to take them along. Callum, Callum, will they say anything to add before we go close the pub?
No, I guess the one thing, I just on Callum's point around the young kids, I think it's an incredibly important thing, because the game will die off otherwise. Because we've got competing with Xbox, competing with PlayStation, compete with everything, and then all we're getting priced out of football, not be able to go with the dad or whatever. So yeah, no, that's vital. I would say what I would like to see is that the Labour Party, because I guess this was about socialism, the Labour Party are meant to be a socialist party. Meant to be. What I would like to see is the Labour Party actually start to take a more greater position around football fans, not just write a letter to the marketing standards authority. Actually come out with something radical, come out with something bold, come up with something that's achievable. Even like before the 51% stuff was going on, there's things like about how can you save clubs like Bury. Make them so if you've got a football club like Bury about to go under, let the government step in, give that money, give that club back to the fans or the local council. So it's then a community-led football club, other than let it fall by the wayside. Obviously now times have moved on, and since the Super League, and probably we are in a position where we can be demanding a lot more. But I just wish that the party would do something that actually is going to benefit people, rather than just have vacuous statements about how this is wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks very much to both of you. It's been really, really good. I've enjoyed this chat. Could probably sit around and talk about this for another hour or so, but it's been great, and I hope people have enjoyed it. So thanks very much. Cheers.
Nice one, chaps. Take care. Speak to you.